Hello everyone and welcome back to a brand new video of Fox Flicks On, a new channel. This is Bandit Games, and today we're going to check out his video of all bosses explained of the game, A Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword. Let's hop in and see him explain these bosses. First up, the non-malice bosses.
A Zelda game without
Wonder what that
bosses is like
means.
rice without any curry. Like, yeah, you could just eat the rice, it might even taste good fried or with a little salt, but where's the dal? Where's the paneer? Where's the chicken tikka? Bosses
right.
are what make Zelda games feel unique and interesting, and Skyward Sword has no lack of interesting and unique bosses indeed. So buckle up and
does
get
not.
ready, because to continue my series explaining every boss in every Zelda game, we're gonna dive deep into the stories and lore behind every single boss in the first game on the timeline, The Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword. And
That's right.
spoiler
This is
alert,
the
obviously.
first of it
The first
all.
genre or grouping of bosses we'll cover would be those
Ow.
that are the natural enemies of the game. What I mean by that is bosses or beings that may have not been affected by Demise's malice or Girahim's personality,
Oh,
or
that
at
would
least
make
the ones
sense.
that are not confirmed to have been affected. Speaking of enemies that aren't confirmed to be affected, there are a few bosses that fit this criteria that aren't really bosses, but do serve as mini bosses the first time they're encountered, due to the fact that they are
Yeah,
a bit
he's
tougher
right.
than your average bokoblin, which is a trend that happens with these same
A
enemies in a
boss?
lot of Zelda
Kind
games
of a mini
actually.
boss.
First up is the Lizalfos, which is a monster that may or may not
Oh, come on.
Here's what you
We're back. Let's go.
have been entirely created out of the evil power and malice of Demise, many years ago when he initially created his armies to battle against Hylia and the forces of light. The reason I say they may have been created by Demise is because Fi tells us directly that Demise is the source of all monsters. However, there are some monsters which I'll go over that didn't stem from Demise, so it's also possible that
Like
things like the
naturally occurring
Lizalfos are
monsters.
naturally occurring species in the land of Hyrule, but I digress. The next boss that may have not originated from Demise's power is the Moldarak, which is a giant
I remember
armor-clad,
you.
thousand-year-old scorpion monster with a large singular eye. Well, actually 3 eyes with 2 in its claws and 1 in the middle, which is reminiscent of Goma, which is another reappearing boss of the Zelda franchise that appears differently each time, but every time being some sort of an arachnid monster that always features a singular main eye for Link to normally shoot at. The Moldarak
always
is
got
actually just an
something.
aged version of the much more abundant and much more tiny Araka monsters, which are very similar to just
They're actually
real-life
kind of cute.
scorpions with 1 eye. We don't have any specific reason to believe these monsters were created by Demise, except for the
Jab,
fact that they
jab,
disappear
jab,
in a puff
jab.
of purple smoke when they die. But, you know, it could go either way. Next up is a boss that would
mean, the
actually
purple
be
kind of gives it
difficult
away.
to connect to Demise, and that is the 100% robotic artificial life form known as the LD-002G Servo, or as I like to call him, Yarg, the robot pirate. Beep boop. Servo is a member
he
of the
literally
ancient
is
robot race
a
encountered
robot
on the sand
pirate,
ship, which
is he
used to be
not?
just a regular ship before the sea became sand. Also, fun fact, the LD in all these robots' names stands for Lanayru Desert, which makes sense until you remember that when they were created, it was an ocean,
Wait.
not a desert. But we just won't dwell on that for too
that is
long.
actually
We
starting
actually
to
know a
think
little bit
now.
about Servo's backstory too. According to a single word from Fi, it's possible that Servo used to be a member of the crew of the ship, led by LD-301N Skipper, and that Servo then led a few other crew members in a mutiny against Skipper
So
and
that's
his
what
loyal
happened.
crew. But I know what you're thinking, how could robots command a ship and even mutiny against each other? Where did they come from? Well, and this is just a theory of course, but in my opinion, the ancient robots were created by an ancient race of people that are closely associated with Hylia and Nehru and technology and also the
mean-
color blue. You know,
Yeah, it's
the
like kind of
Sheikah. We know they existed in the
Oh.
ancient times of Skyward Sword
Okay.
because Impa comes from the past. I think it's pretty plausible that the Sheikah were mining time shift stones in order to create the Gate of Time under order of the goddess Hylia, who is
Yeah, that
credited
makes
with the
sense.
creation of the Gate of Time and also possibly being the goddess of time itself, but hey, that's a whole other theory. The time shift stones that are cut and processed
Yeah,
even have an
time
ancient
travel
version of the
is
Sheikah
wibbly
eye symbol
wobbly.
present on them. I think that the ancient robots were most likely created either by the Sheikah or by Hylia herself in order to assist in mining timeshift stones. Perhaps even in order to find all of the powerful resource there is to find in the world before it can fall into the clutches of Demise.
Yeah, that would
because
make
if Demise
sense.
were to
Be a
also
clever
harness
thing
the
to
ability
do.
to travel through time at will, that could be problematic. This
Yeah,
is why the
everyone-
ancient robots
everyone would
created
just be
ancient
screwed
ships
if
in the
Demise
shipyard
got
in order
time
to travel
travel.
far across the ancient sea and scour the region for timeshift ore, led by one LD-301 model, in particular, Skipper. Then one day
call
there
him
was a sea
Skipper.
squall, and conveniently that was also the day that Servo decided to mutiny and take over the ship. There's also an improved version of the LD-002G Servo known as the
Oh.
LD-003D Dreadfuse, who appears
Okay,
much
that's kinda
later in the
cool.
game in the Sky Keep, which which is a shifty dungeon created by Hylia in order to keep the Triforce hidden from the world, and also helps to prove that the ancient robots were in fact created by Hylia either directly or indirectly, since everything inside the Skykeep must have been placed there by Hylia as a test for the hero. This is also another reason to potentially believe that not all monsters were created by Demise, since there are bokoblins and moblins and keys and others located inside the keep, but anyway, moving on. The next boss in this section would be the underground crawling insects known as Moldorms that make multiple appearances in this game and in other games in the franchise. I personally believe that these monsters are just naturally occurring large insect wildlife that just so happens to be aggressive towards Link. Just like most of their other appearances, they're elongated, segmented, worm-like, centipede-like monsters that are clad in armor everywhere but for their tails, except for in Twilight Princess when they're just little jumpy worms. The final boss for this first section of the video would be the infamously intimidating abyssal leviathan known as Tantalus. I had to research long and hard to get the backstory on this one, but I'm pretty sure you're gonna enjoy it. You see, long ago, in a galaxy far, far away, there was a little one-eyed monster known as Michael Wazowski. Over a long, painstaking ordeal, Mike was finally able to marry his longtime girlfriend, Celia May. Together they had a child that shared characteristics from both of them and was born with a single eye and snake-like hair tendrils. In all seriousness though, this boss out of pretty much every Zelda boss in the history of Zelda bosses is probably one of the worst designs for an abyssal leviathan that I've ever seen. And yes, its design looks like something out of Monsters Incorporated. Eerily similar, in fact. Like seriously, does Disney know about this? Do they need to get involved? But appearances aside, there are a couple things that we can guess about its background, which otherwise is completely devoid of any and all details. See, when you actually face the giant tentacle monster, it's in the distant past, as proven by all the water around the boat, and also the fact that the boat doesn't look like a piece of garbage. And also, when you talk to your flying blue computer companion about Tantalus, she confirms that it was a tyrant of the ancient seas. Now, this is particularly interesting because we also know that where Tantalus is, a storm or sea squall is sure to follow, as proven by the storm or sea squall that we can see here while fighting it. And while we don't have any other confirmed records of an ancient sea monster plaguing anybody in the game, we do have a record of an ancient terrible sea squall that happened on the same day that the mutiny occurred aboard Skipper's ship. And personally, I don't find that a coincidence. So on the one hand, it could be that Demise or Girahim was responsible for creating Tantalus and making Tantalus make storms that led to mutinies, or on the other hand, it could be that the fearsome pirate Servo and his scurvy robo crew found some way to call upon the abyssal leviathan to aid them in their quest for mutiny. I think I like that explanation better because it gives some mythological feel to Tantalus and makes the relationship between it and Servo seem kind of like the one between the Kraken and Davy Jones. What can I say? I love Pirates of the Caribbean, and Tantalus is pretty Kraken-like, you've got to admit. But whether Tantalus was simply a mysterious mythological monster of the deep from ancient times that was called upon by scurvy pirates, or it was created by Demise, is up to you to believe, of course. But one other detail I'll point out that could mean nothing but could also mean something is that Tantalus' English name, you know, Tantalus, is extremely similar to Tantalus, which is a Greek mythological figure, one of Zeus's many children that was famously punished by being made to stand in a pool of water that he could not drink out of, with an apple hanging from a tree above him that he could not eat because it was just out of reach. That's actually where our modern word tantalize or tantalizing comes from. How that relates to Tantalus, I'm not sure, but do with that information what you will. Who knows, maybe Tantalus wasn't always an abyssal sea monster, but was cursed into that form long ago as a punishment. Moving on to the next segment of the video, it's time to talk about the many bosses that were definitely created or influenced by the dark powers of Demise and Co. The most obvious ones would be the Stalfos enemies, or the more powerful Stalmaster variants, which are of course risen undead skeletal monsters that were at one point warriors in life. They're also one of the only monsters in the entire franchise that has made an appearance in every Zelda game, I think. I'm not sure, I scripted that off the top of my head. Somebody watching fact check that for me, but I'm pretty sure they've been in every Zelda game. Anyway, their explanation is the same as always, which is that they are corpses quickened once more by Demise. Next up, we've got the main boss Scaldera, the pyroclastic fiend from the Earth Temple. You know, that boulder-looking living glob of lava that uses a bunch of rock as armor. Fortunately for us, we've got a pretty direct confirmation from Girahim himself that Scaldera was more than likely a demon created by Girahim. He knows about Scaldera, he even introduces Link to Scaldera, who he calls his friend. What a hospitable guy. I guess I'll have to refer to Scaldera as the pyroclastic friend from now on. Next up, we've got the one, the only, the terrifying ancient automaton Koloktos, located deep within the ancient cistern. Now, besides Girahim or Demise himself, Koloktos is undoubtedly one of the most recognizable bosses in all of Zelda Zelda history. I mean, just look at this thing. It's shiny, it's kinda creepy, it's got 6 arms and wee little legs. I mean, what's not to love? As its name insinuates,
Other than
and
the
in
fact it's
conjunction
trying to
with the
kill
ancient
ya.
cistern within which it
Duh.
is located, Koloktos is in fact ancient. And given that it was an automaton that was ultimately tasked with guarding the Chamber of the Flame, I'm pretty sure Hylia, who
Grab the
apparently had a
sword.
knack for making robots, was the one to create both the dungeon itself and Koloktos. That being said, Koloktos might have actually been a sentient machine once, much like the LD models, if it weren't for Girahim's interference and the corruption of Demise's
Okay, now
malice.
that's actually
That's
something to
right,
think
you
about.
heard me. Malice. The same stuff that's swirling around in Breath of the Wild that goes by the name Calamity Ganon. You may have heard of it. I mean, the pieces add up. It came from Girahim, which came from Demise, and it's a dark purple goopy substance that possesses and corrupts
Yeah, I mean,
technology. And it's probably the
malice,
same substance
isn't
that's
it?
dropped by the cursed bokoblins, which are also present in the dungeon, which is monster malice, referred to as an evil crystal when it crystallizes. Pharaon also states that the cistern used to not have any monsters inside, so this means that once Demise or maybe Girahim got word of Link obtaining the goddess sword, Girahim took it upon himself to leak malice into the dungeon personally. But what is this, a
Of
Lore of the
course he did.
Dungeons video? No, it's not. So we're gonna
Next
move
time.
on. Next up is the Dark Lizalfos, which, just
Oh.
like their name sounds, are the dark versions of regular Lizalfos. These Dark
Just
Lizalfos are to Lizalfos what cursed bokoblins are to bokoblins. Well, kind of, because they don't look like zombies, but they can curse Link, just like cursed bokoblin bites do. They don't drop evil crystals as loot, but the fact that other enemies in the game that can also inflict curse, like the cursed bokoblins or dark keys, do drop evil crystals,
Interesting.
leads me to believe that the ability to curse, at least in Skyward Sword, comes directly from being possessed by Demise's malice, as proven by the evil crystals. So
It
in a
would
nutshell,
fit and
Dark
make
Lizalfos
easy
are more than
sense.
likely malice-tainted Lizalfos. Next up, but also in the same dungeon that the Dark Lizalfos are first encountered, are the multiple appearing lava hand monsters known as
it's you
Magmanoses. And to be honest with you, there's literally nothing about their origins in the game. So logically, I feel that just like Girahim was able to create a living lava demon monster known as Scaldera, the pyroclastic friend, he probably was also able to create these living lava demon hand monsters. Who knows, maybe Scaldera
it's
and the
literally just a
Magmanoses are
hand.
not only a cool band name, but also the result of malice being conjoined with the lava of Death Mountain. I mean Elden Volcano. Something we may be seeing happen again in Tears of the Kingdom. And speaking of malice, the final boss to
Alright,
cover before
I'm
covering the
actually
big
interested.
baddies themselves would be the easily forgettable Bylosite, which is the parasite responsible for corrupting Levius or Levius or however you pronounce his name,
it's
the
Levius.
windfish, and also for causing his temporary insanity. Bylosite is malice, plain and simple. Seriously, just look at this concept art for Levius.
Oh my
Dark reddish
God, that
purple
is
clouds,
awesome.
corruption, sentient eyeballs. Yeah, that literally fits the bill for exactly what malice is in Breath of the Wild. The only
Badass.
question I have is, when did Levius get corrupted? If he stayed flying up above the cloud barrier, then he should have been largely unaffected by any of the badness happening on the surface, right? Well, as we see in the Leviathan Bones of Breath of the Wild
Oh,
and the
man.
ending cutscene for Link's Awakening, windfishes can definitely descend down to the surface at will. And in Skyward
Yes,
Sword,
they
we
can.
even see Levius flying back up to the sky from beneath the cloud barrier, and there's only
Because of
one
the
thing down
pumpkin
there,
soup.
the surface. So it's possible that Girahim started messing with the Thunderdome, turning it into a Thunderdome, and Levius then flew down to the surface
Funny.
to check out what the heck was going on, and subsequently got corrupted by malice somehow. He never
get it.
actually sheds light on what happened. Though personally, I'm of the opinion that it was in fact Girahim's doing. Seriously, when in doubt, blame Demise's uber-powerful super demon running
in
around the
doubt,
world with the
blame
express purpose of
Girahim.
setting everything as out of order
Girahim.
as possible.
Why did I say
And what a
Girahim?
masterful segue into talking about the fabulous boy himself in the final segment of this video. But right before we do explain Mr. Eyeshadow, I wanted to thank you
Yep.
for watching these videos. Seriously, I know it doesn't really matter to the vast majority watching right now, but it means a lot to me. If this isn't the first one of these videos of mine you've watched, or if you enjoy this one being your first one so far, by the way, hi, my name's Bandit, nice to meet you.
Nice
I
to meet
wanted
you,
to ask if
Bandit.
you would be
I'm
so
Fox.
kind as to consider subscribing to the channel. I know lots of you are either rolling your eyes or looking to fast forward the segment right now, and that's okay, but for those of you still listening, I just wanted you to know that for the first time, I'm beginning to feel like this channel could really grow. Like, really grow.
Oh, it definitely
Especially
can,
with this
man.
Lore of
Your
the
content
Bosses
is
series
great.
expanding into other franchises. And I can see that 80% of my viewers, or about 4 out of every 5 people watching my videos currently, are
know
actually
what?
not
I can
subscribed to the
fix that.
channel. To put that into perspective, if
Check
that were
this.
flipped and it was actually 80% of you
And
that that
boom,
are subscribed, then this channel would literally be at over 1 million subscribers since starting the Lore of the Bosses series, which is insane to think about. But anyway, I won't take up any more runtime talking about this. Once again, thank you so much for watching, and please consider subscribing to help grow the channel and flip that statistic to help get us to, let's say, 300,000? Dream big, right? And you can always unsubscribe later if I lose my touch. And now back to Girahim. And really, it's kind of hard to explain Girahim's existence without also explaining Demise's, but in either case, let's start with what we know about Girahim. We know that he's a demon lord, being one of the most powerful versions of monsters in the entire franchise, who proclaims himself to be the Lord of the Surface, and that he was created by Demise in order to be an extension of his will and carry on the battle against Hylia no matter how many years it might take, which is exactly parallel to Phi, who was created by Hylia in order to be an extension of her will and carry on the battle against Demise no matter how many years that might take. But more on the parallelism between these two parties in just a bit. He's also very confident and driven and cunning, able to thwart even a wish of the Triforce, but none of that is crucial information. To be honest, Girahim really isn't that hard to explain. He was created by Demise. He serves Demise. Case closed. The real mystery is, why is everything regarding Girahim and Demise strangely exactly parallel to Hylia and her partner? Well, I'll tell you what I think, but forewarning, we are entering the major theory zone. Of course, you are as always welcome to believe whatever you personally would like to. I'd like to start off by saying that there are many different theories about how Demise came from Lorule and stuff like that, and it's all really good stuff. Ultimately, as far as I can tell, it comes down to the fact that Demise is said to have emerged from a fissure or crack within the earth, and his Master Sword, aka Girahim in sword form, has an inverted Triforce symbol in the exact place where the Hylia Master Sword has an upright one. The fissure that he emerged from is similar to the fissures that connect Lorule and Hyrule in A Link Between Worlds, and the inverted Triforce symbol is seemingly the same as the inverted Triforce symbol also from Lorule, which was a land destroyed long ago. This theory insinuates that that might even be the entire reasoning for Demise invading Hyrule, so that he could have Hyrule's Triforce instead. Like I said, this is actually a really good theory and really great way of thinking, but it does leave a few things up to the imagination. For instance, it doesn't explain where Demise came from, as in literally where, or rather who he came from. It also doesn't explain his intentions, as in why he wants a Triforce in the first place, or why he hates, you know...
Wait, here's a theory for you. What if Demise is the Lorule equivalent of Hylia? Like, he was the false god of the realm, but after creating the Triforce via the help of whoever, and seeing it be used to destroy it, he was upset with how people were destroying his gift. So he traveled through the fissure to Hyrule to try to take that Triforce and rebuild Lorule, but this time at full power. Only for Demise to be stopped and yada 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 the game.
Oh, good. My theory will explain both. In the beginning, the goddesses created everything. Every ocean, every mountain, every creature, down to every last blade of grass. And this isn't debatable. This is canonical, proven lore that even has its own cutscenes in Ocarina of Time and Twilight Princess. And once the goddesses were finished with their creation, they left the world. And at the point of their departure, the Triforce was made. However, that was not all that was created. Now, I'd like to ask you something. Something that's very philosophical, but also a cold reality. Given that the world of Hyrule was created, that would mean that nothing existed before it, right? Meaning light and dark, heat and cold, up and down, and good and evil, and all these contrasting forces of the universe that give it form did not exist yet. When the world was created, all of these things came to fruition out of the creation of contrast, because in each case, one cannot exist without the other. Light was created, therefore dark was subsequently created as well. Heat was created, therefore cold was as well. Up was created, therefore down was as well. And good was created, therefore evil must have been created as well. And this is the crux of my theory. What if the concepts of good and evil, which must have been created along with the creation of everything, were actually literally manifested in the beings known as Hylia the goddess and Demise the demon? Twin deities of good and evil to govern the world and define life and progress. Think about it, where else would Demise have come from if not from the same origin of literally everything else in the universe? And given that everything that is good in the entire entire franchise somehow stems from Hylia, and everything that's evil in the entire franchise somehow stems from Demise, and both of these individuals are inexplicably all-powerful with permanent, eternal effects on the world, wouldn't it make sense for both of them to literally be the embodiments of good and evil incarnate? I mean, the more you think about it, the more it actually makes sense. Everything about them is perfectly parallel to one another. Hylia defends the Triforce, Demise pursues it. Hylia created a Master Sword with a Triforce facing skyward, Demise created a Master Sword with a Triforce facing towards the Earth. Hylia exists at the edge of time, Demise has conquered time itself.
Boom.
Do you see a pattern? Because it's actually everywhere. And we know the goddesses themselves are morally neutral. I mean, they have to be, right? Plus, we've seen them time and time again make very morally gray choices, such as the repeated choosing of Ganondorf to host the Triforce of Power, or the flooding of Hyrule prior to Wind Waker. You know, not everyone made it out alive with that one. Mountaintops are only so big. So in my opinion, this works perfectly because the goddesses themselves are outside of our ideologies of good and evil, because they created it. But okay, you're probably thinking right about now, yeah, that's logical and philosophical and everything, and it does explain exactly where Demise came from, but what about his rage? His hatred that never perishes? Where did that come from? And that is a great question, because seriously, what happened to Demise to make him so eternally hateful of the goddesses in Hylia? Well, here's a simple kind of paradoxical answer for you. What if he's simply self-aware? Demise isn't stupid. Actually, quite the opposite. He's brilliant and so masterful a tactician that he successfully plotted his own escape from his imprisoned form before he was even imprisoned by creating Girahim. So what if Demise is so hateful of the goddesses because he knows why they created him, and he didn't ask to be made? He didn't ask for this life of pain. And I know that's a really dark concept, but seriously, what if you found out one day that you were created for the sole purpose of being the incarnation of evil in the world? You were never destined for a nice or good or happy ending, unlike your twin Hylia. Instead, you had only bitterness and defeat to look forward to, as ordained by your creators. So you let your anger at your own existence overcome you and become your every thought, not knowing that in your blind rage and defiance of your creators and your twin, you were becoming exactly what they had intended you would become: hatred itself. An eternal curse upon good, and a necessary force to drive life into death, into life, into death, into life again, all in an eternal cycle. Because without contrast, we don't have color. Without darkness, we don't have light. And without a necessary evil, we don't have good. And that is my explanation for why Demise, or more specifically, the bringer of Demise, as is his real name in Japanese, was created. I do hope you enjoyed my explanations, and if you did, please consider leaving a like on the video to get it spread around more, and hey, subscribe if you haven't yet, because I and the future of the channel would greatly appreciate it. Also, you'd stick around for a bunch of extremely cool videos, so just you wait. Huge thanks as always to my bandit crew, of which I have a few new names to announce. Say hi to...
looks like the rest of this is just going to be him giving thanks, and then it's going to be the X-File outro. But anyway, wow, that was deep. Yeah, so... like, comment, subscribe, and link to the original video will be in the description below. So support Bandit and all he does, and I'll see all of you folks next time when we flick on. I need to schedule some therapy now.